Except Chairman Norris and Vice Chairman Jacopisi are the only two that we have not heard from. We did not have a confirmation from the two of them. So anytime you're ready, once we get Mayor Romero on, you can call the meeting to him. Yes, you have a quorum, but we're waiting for, yes, you do have a quorum. We're just waiting for Mayor Romero before you hopefully can call the meeting to order.
Okay.
Farhad,
She did call.
I'm on board.
Oh, there you are. Thank you so much. So Mayor Romero is here as well. So Mayor Honey, if you don't mind, I'll go over the instructions quickly and then you can call the meeting to order. Again, just as a reminder, please leave your own device unmuted the whole time. Our moderators can control mute and unmute. This way we don't get any background noise. So please leave your device unmuted. If you happen to mute your device accidentally, please remember to check and unmute. And then during a call for a vote and following presentations, we'll make sure that we unmute everybody, but to help the chair, please state your name. Once the chair recognizes you, please go ahead and proceed. And then once you're done, then we'll mute your phone again. So with that, Mayor Honey, you have a quorum, please go ahead.
Okay, then we'll call the meeting to order. The number 2 item is approval of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion?
Mayor Honey?
Mayor Romero?
Looks like Mayor.
I see the chairman's hand up as well.
I'm so sorry, but I
Okay,
couldn't connect to the video. But I did want to pull consent agenda item C for, I just have a couple of questions if that's okay.
So Mayor Honey, we'll be happy to do that. You have a motion from Supervisor Valadez. If you'd like to wait, we can do it all later.
Do we have a second?
Or we can do that one separately.
Do we have a second?
Second.
From Mayor Winfield. All in favor except for item C on consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
I think it passes, so we'll go to item C. Mayor Romero.
Yes, Honey, thank you so much for letting me pull this item. It is on the regional traffic data, and I just wanted to request more information on the specific areas where this data collection will be added, or how these areas were selected. It doesn't really talk too much about the specific areas where this data will be collected. I like that we're moving forward with this, but if there's a possibility of getting more information, I would appreciate it.
Mr. Baghimi, do you have a response?
Sure, yeah. Yes, Mayor Honey, Mayor Romero. This is our annual traffic count program. We typically do data from all major intersections. We look at turning movement data, and there's a variety of locations that we have a history of data that we collect data to compare with previous years. So it pretty much covers the entire regional network, and then there are certain areas that, as needed, they're to be determined, and then we ask our consultant to go out and collect additional data. So it's more of an as-needed type of approach. If there's any areas that are missing that you're interested in, just let us know, and we'll make sure those areas are included.
I just don't see any detail on the traffic count and what intersections are being included in that traffic count. So I just wanted the detail as to where these areas are. The intersections are.
We'll be happy to send that out. Again, it's Basically, it covers significant intersections. We'll be happy to send out more detail on the scope that's being negotiated currently with the consultant. But again, it's a history of the traffic data that we continue to build on and compare with previous years. If you recall, there's actually a map of our traffic counts that covers all of arterials and major roads. That information is used to update that map on a regular basis, same as our modeling. So again, if there's a specific area that you believe needs to be included that's not included, we'll be able to add that to the scope. But I believe majority of the areas that are of interest and have been of interest in the past are included.
Well, I don't see the areas, I don't see the corridors, the information is not here. That's why I'm asking about what corridors and what areas there is. I'm glad to see that there's pedestrian and bicycle counts, but there's no information as to what corridors there is unless you've given this information out and I haven't received it. It's not in
The request at this time is to amend the contract so we can negotiate with the consultant on the scope of work. Once we negotiate on the scope, obviously we can have the additional details. We have a draft scope that we can share if that's something that's interesting at this point. But typically that's negotiated after we have authorization to proceed.
So there's no intended corridors that you have defined for this data count?
No, they are defined. So let me ask Dave Adler to maybe chime in if he has a list of some of those corridors available. But again, these are all by classification, all major regional corridors that are classified as regional corridors are included. David, do you have any specific lists that you can name at this point?
Hi, Farhad, Mayor Honey, Mayor Romero. No, as Farhad mentioned, that list will be developed as soon as we have contract extension. We're talking about over 400 roadway segments and another 115 intersections within the region that would have the counts done. So they have not yet been identified. What we do is we contact jurisdictional partners and ask if they have any preferences to be added to the list.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's all I wanted to know, if the corridors have been selected and if the different towns in the city would be contacted in terms of where we feel we would like to add a corridor if it's not on your list already. Do you know the timeline or time frame as to when the City Transportation and Mobility Department will be contacted?
Mayor Honey, Mayor Romero, my assumption would be here in over the summer. The counts do not start until into September. So we would get the list to the consultant as soon as we can. So we would contact them, I would guess here in the next month or two at the latest.
Okay, ready. We would love to see the ones in the city and see if there's a need to include any others that we'd like to be part of that count.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So Farhad, you will be contacting, or I think it's Steve.
Yes, Mayor Romero again. Mayor Romero, our traffic modeling team takes the lead on that effort, and there's actually a subcommittee that works with them. So they go through the subcommittee process and make that request. I believe it's typically the traffic division from each jurisdiction that's involved with the subcommittee. And then they can go ahead and and make sure that everybody in each organization is involved in the conversation. So it's a very comprehensive exercise, and we do it annually. And again, to this point, we haven't had any new corridors to add. Obviously, anytime we do, we'll add new corridors, but all major corridors are already included in our modeling exercise.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have
Thank
a
you.
motion
So,
to
Mayor,
approve item C on the consent agenda?
So I'd like to move the item.
Second.
I heard Mayor Romero move it. Did we get a second?
Second.
Seconded from Chairman
Supervisor
Valdez.
Valdez, second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That carries. We'll move on to item 3, legislative update. Nathan Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Regional Council. I'm going to cover action that's going on both at the federal and state level. Most of the action over the last couple of months has been at the federal level. What we've seen so far are 4 bills related to coronavirus relief, with a 5th bill on the table. The 4 bills that have already passed are often referred to as phases 1, 2, 3, and phase 3.5. So I'm going to go over each of those very briefly. Phase 1 passed, was signed into law on March 6th. It's called the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2020. This is a bill that was very much focused on getting funds into the healthcare industry for research and development of vaccines, therapeutics, diagnostics, public health funding for prevention and preparedness, purchase of medical supplies, and even some funds to help with the COVID-19 effort internationally. Phase 2 was passed a couple weeks after that, March 18th. That was called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This bill provided for free coronavirus testing. It provided additional paid sick leave for coronavirus purposes, such as caring for a family member. It boosted unemployment benefits, increased nutritional assistance, etc. Phase 3 was another 10 days or so after that. It was signed into law on March 27th. This is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, or the CARES Act. And this is probably the one that got the most play in the media, TV, newspapers. This was a $2 trillion relief bill, and it included individual payments to U.S. taxpayers. It also included assistance to businesses and a loan program for small businesses. That loan program for the small businesses actually proved to be very popular, and the funds got drawn down very quickly, which is why there was a need for a phase 3.5, which was signed about a month later on April 24th. It just refilled what was called the Paycheck Protection Program, which was a program to help small businesses stay afloat during this time. There's a 5th bill currently on the table. This is being called Phase 4. It's called the Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act, or the HEROES Act. It passed the House of Representatives on May 15th. This is a $3 trillion relief bill, so 50% bigger than Phase 3. It has a second round of direct payments. It's got $31 billion in transportation funding, split more or less evenly between FHWA and FTA, and it extends unemployment benefits and provides hazard pay for essential workers. Because of the size and scope of this bill, most Congress watchers are expecting that the Senate will pare back on this bill quite a bit before it receives its final form. At the state level, we saw an abbreviated legislative session. The legislature actually recessed on March 23rd. Before doing so, they passed a state budget, which many people are calling a skinny budget. The skinny budget had full funding for all government services, but there were no bells and whistles and creative movements of funds. What that means is no HERF diversions, but also no special distributions to the HERF as we've seen in previous years, and no appropriations for specific projects. Again, something we've seen in recent years. When the state legislature adjourned on March 23rd, it was indefinitely, but it was not sine die, meaning they hadn't adjourned for the entire session. They did come back into session last week. The House gavelled into session, passed a few bills that had already passed the Senate, and then they adjourned sine die on May 21st. The Senate gavelled into session earlier this week, and then a few hours later gavelled out of session and adjourned sine die on May 26th. That concludes the legislative session for the state, or at least the regular legislative session. But a lot of legislative watchers are anticipating a special session to be gavelled in later this summer to address specific coronavirus-related issues. So at this time, I can take any questions you might have about federal or state action that has occurred this year.
Do we have any questions? Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The next item is adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So
Move adjournment. Second.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
All right, well, in that case, we'll call the RTA into session, or in the call to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and take care of that. Mayor Honey.
Hi, I'm here.
Hopefully everybody's unmuted. Mayor Murphy,
Present.
we know he's here. Mr. Hammond,
Here.
Muted.
there we go. He's muted. Please unmute Mayor Tesso as well.
He's still muted.
We'll come back to Mayor Tesso. We'll come back to Mayor Tesso. Mayor Romero,
Here.
there we go. Mayor Tesso is here, but he's muted, so he probably unmuted his own device. There you go. I can see it. Great. Thank you, Mayor Tesso. Appreciate it. And obviously, Supervisor Valdez is here. Mayor Winfield.
Here.
Mayor Winfield is here as well. And we know that Chairman Norris and Vice Chairman Yacapucio have not been able to join us yet. So you do have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
All right, we'll move into item number 2, approval of consent calendar. Chair entertain a motion to approve consent calendar.
I move to approve.
I
Second.
moved.
All right, motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please signify by saying nay. Ayes have it. Moving on to item 3, RTA financial update and fiscal year 2021 revenue estimates. Mr. DeGroot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the RTA board. It's been a tumultuous last few months since we met last. On the positive side, the third quarter of the fiscal year did finish very strongly. In fact, we saw a number of milestones. First, our highest ever collections during the month of December, or basically reported to us in the month of February for sales transactions that took place during December, approaching $9 million. So that actually was over 10% greater than our highest prior collection, which was the December holiday sales season the year prior. We have done very well through the third quarter, and in fact, into the fourth quarter, we've done well as well. We are currently 5.15% ahead of what we had collected for the same period last fiscal year, and we are 4.72% ahead of our budget. That is including our most recent deposit, which represents sales that were took place during the month of March. March, as you well know, is the beginning of the impacts, or at least the the most significant beginning of the impacts associated with the current pandemic. We saw a number of industries that were hit very significantly, most notably the transient lodging sector of our economy. That typically peaks during the month of March and represents about 4% of our sales tax collections during March. And instead of 4%, we were at 1.6%. So there were a lot of vacant rooms, particularly as we were seeing the cancellation of a number of major events, the book festival and so forth. So that was where we felt it initially. We also saw a significant decline in restaurant and bar sales, which tied to the to tourism to some extent. It also peaks during the month of March, and we saw what normally is a $1 million plus collection decline to $677,000. So, and that was before dining rooms were formally closed at the end of the month. What we have also begun to see, and now this is still very preliminary because we're only seeing at this point revenue detail from the month collected during the month of March and reported to us in May. We know that the Joint Legislative Budget Committee had reported that statewide sales taxes were down 5.8% during the month of March. Our experience was actually almost 7.8% down. The Phoenix metro area declined at 5.3%. So we were a little bit more impacted during the month of March. As we look ahead, we'll see a number of trends. One is which I think we'll see an increased percentage of our sales coming from remote sales, which begun to be tracked and reported to us by the state in October, and we've seen that growing since, and I think we will continue to see that grow as a percent. In fact, it was over or almost 7.5% of the total amount of retail sales were those that took place remotely, internet sales, if you will. Looking forward, we've been watching what our member jurisdictions have been looking at in terms of what they're predicting for sales taxes in the next fiscal year. We know that the crystal ball is very filled with smoke. What we are recommending is that we look at the baseline estimate that the Eller College had provided to us and reducing it by 15%. So for fiscal year 2021, we're going to be recommending a revenue budget of TPT of basically $77.728 million. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just want to add for the record that Chairman Norris was able to join us just before Jim started his presentation. So just want to welcome him, and he's on audio only.
Ned, good to have you.
Thank you. Good to. I've been listening to you all since Mauro had said I was not able to join the meeting at the beginning. So, and actually,
Well, thank
I'm
you.
on my laptop. I'm on my desktop, so I see all of you, but I guess I'm just on audio to you all. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Norris. All right.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this is
Yeah.
Mayor Winfield. I had a question for Mr. DeGroot. You mentioned that you reached to the jurisdictions as far as what they were estimating in terms of sales tax revenue. Is that correct?
I have observed some study sessions that have been online. I did not reach out to finance directors at this point.
I'm curious if you knew what that range was as far as.
Well, I have observed ranges recommended in the 10 to 15% range. I mean, I believe Mr. Honey, I saw some estimates of 10% declines in the town of Marana, and I believe the city of Tucson in a study session, Mr. Ortega was recommending a 15% reduction. We pegged it at 15%. Our expectation is that as we move through the summer, we will come back to you with the revised budget, revised estimates, and we'll talk about that in the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, hearing none, I don't think that requires an action by the RTA. So we'll move on to item number 5, which is RTA budget for fiscal year 2021. Amy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the RTA board. We're going to be seeking from you today approval of resolution 2020-009, adopting the RTA fiscal budget for 2021, and further approving the rollover of 2020 funds programmed for RTA projects that are in the currently adopted transportation improvement program. And we'll roll those to subsequent fiscal years. We made a number of assumptions in our budget for this year. First, you heard the assumption with respect to revenue, or at least TPT revenue. We also are presenting a budget that fully funds all projects that were identified for RTA funding in the 2020 to 2024 TIP for fiscal year 21. We know that we will have to do a budget revision at the end of the summer, bring it back to you. Once we complete the end of the fiscal year, what we typically do is go and meet with all of the jurisdictional staffs, the transportation departments, and review with them the funds that were expended in the current or the fiscal 20 TIP, determine which of those funds still need to be moved forward, or any remaining funds that need to be moved into the following year, and look at the delivery expectations of the jurisdiction to see if we can make sure everybody has got their projects fully funded, and if there is an excess of funds, we can push it further out into the future. What that would mean was that we would come back to you with an amended budget at the end of the summer, together with a TIP amendment that addresses anything that goes beyond the current or the fiscal 2021 TIP. What we're reflecting in the budget is $77.728 million in TPT revenues, and additional other revenues of $8.28 million. And that's going to consist of funds that come to us from the federal government in the form of grants, in some of our maintenance of effort funding, and investment revenues. On the expenditure side, we have a roadway element budget of $31.28 million. And if you go into the detail, you'll see that there's also a negative number in there, and that represents a payment that we'll be receiving from Arizona Department of Transportation, where they will refund us money that we previously expended on the Ina Road interchange. So the actual amount of capacity is closer to $35 million of what we'll actually be spending on new projects in the roadway element in fiscal year 2021. New safety element expenditures are budgeted at $2.9 million, and the environment and economic vitality element has a budget in fiscal year 2021 of $4.847 million. We will be paying debt service in the amount of $29.749 million in fiscal 21. That's for the series 2011, 2013, and 2017 bonds that have been issued. We have administrative expenses of $1.653 million. I won't go into the gory detail of the individual projects that are identified, but we are obligated this year to adopt a budget so that we can continue to pay our reimbursement requests into the next fiscal year. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Anyone have any questions? Any questions? Hearing none, then Chair will entertain a motion to approve.
Mayor Murphy, so moved. Second.
All right, the motion is second. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, please signify by saying nay. Ayes have it, motion carries. Moving on to adjournment. If no one has anything else on the agenda, this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank
Thank you. Good to see you guys. Good to hear you.
Thank you, Farhad, and thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you all. Appreciate putting up with the technology challenge. Thank you.
Bye. We'll get better at this.